So first I'll say a couple of words in Bulgarian, and then I'll continue in English, as it will be more useful for our guests. Уважаеми колеги, първо благодаря на всички, които намериха време да дойдат в един работен ден, все пак в часове, в които е вероятно много от колегите ни да се заедат с неотложни ангажименти. Тази среща е организирана в рамките на съвместното сътрудничество на Института за литература Към и на Института за грузинска литература към Грузинската Академия на Науките. Поводът за срещата ни е един проект, който ще бъде представен в самото начало на тази менеджерска конференция. Докладите на тримата грузински колеги ще изслушаме след това. Ще има, разбира се, дискусия, която се надявам да бъде особено важната част на тази среща. Всички вие сте получили професионалните биографии и резюметата на докладите на нашите гости, така че предполагам, ние сме предварително запознати с тематиката, по която работят. So I'll continue in English. You're very, very welcome. We are very glad to meet you. First of all, because we don't have very often such possibilities meeting colleagues from Georgia. From what I saw in your summaries, your problematics is very similar to the problematics on which we work. And we already had a couple of words in advance, but now officially I'll present our guests. Professor Irma Ratiani, the director of the Georgian Institute for Literature at the Georgian Academy of Sciences, and the head of the Department for General and Comparative Literary Studies. Professor Нино Миндиашвили from Caucasus International University, had the doctoral office there, and Associate Professor Gага Lomidze from Tbilisi State University, Иване Джавахишвили. Do I pronounce it correctly? Okay. And head of the Scholarly Council of the Institute for Georgian Literature. I will not waste our time and energy because we are already impatient to hear about the general project. We have read in advance your professional biographies and the summaries of your papers, and they are very interesting, very topical for this period, something which is very much investigated in our scholarly circles in Bulgaria too, because they have much to do with problems like literature and politics, problems of the countries which have passed through radical political transition and what they do with their cultures, and also such a topic which I wouldn't call of small and big cultures, but I would rather call it the problem of languages which are less or more popular. The problem of the less popular languages, how they impose their cultures, their literatures abroad, and which I already spoke to with our guests about during a festival which I'm organizing in Plovdiv. It's a festival only for poetry. Only for the last 3 years I had the pleasure to meet 2 poets from Georgia, which means that Georgian politics about these cultural promotions is quite well working, and maybe such political issues like this war, awful, tragic war, in Ukraine, even push a little bit, activate the strands of culture, the humanities, the literary thinking, everything with which the human mind could respond peacefully to the aggression of politics and all sorts of interests, which are obviously against the human beings. And now I'll invite Professor Irma Ratиани to present in general terms the project which made us together.
Good day, it's my pleasure to be here. I would like to make kind of very short introduction of this project, why we are here, and what is the main idea of this project. First and foremost, I would like to thank the director of this institute for inviting us, for generosity she showed, and I'm sorry we cannot meet her, but anyway, please give our warmest regards to her. And thank you all for coming. It's really very important for us to have you here. The title of our project is Georgian Literature Worldwide. So the idea of this project actually was derived from 2022. It was a very important year for our Georgian Academic Society, because in 2022 we organized the first huge scientific forum in Tbilisi, Congress of International Comparative Literature Association, ICLA, and it had more than 1,000 participants, and because of a very difficult situation in the world, it was COVID not finished everywhere. Also, unfortunately, this horrible war started in Ukraine. So we had 3 different formats. Around 500 academics arrived in Tbilisi. Around 500 were online. And for some academics, we organized hybrid meetings. So it was really very difficult. But the best outcome of this Congress was the idea of this new project. Why? Because one of the most important branches of this Congress was the literatures of small countries, not minor literatures, but small countries and their literatures with big history, like is Georgian literature and your literature in many other countries in the world. So, and it was very much outlined. And after the Congress was finished, we received a lot of invitations throughout the world. People wanted to understand more about Georgian literature, and so that's why the idea of this project came to us. And we applied, and Georgia National Science Foundation supported this idea. So this is first year of this project. We already had lectures, and we started from Princeton University at United States. Then we had lectures at Sorbonne University in France. Then we went to Azerbaijan, because regional politics is very important for us, and we had lectures at Hazar University there, and the Academy of Science of Azerbaijan. Now we are your guests, and the last point is Germany, Berlin. We will have speeches at Potsdam University and Viadrina. And what is good, this project will continue in the future, as they assured me, because we already have governmental support, and we want to enlarge the geography of this project. The idea is to, I don't like this word, popularization, I really don't like, but that is what is expressing maybe this, yeah? I mean, more like academic, let's say, academic acquaintance with Georgian literature, what it is really doing and where we are and so on. Each country somehow chooses the sphere of their interest. It was the choice of Bulgarian side to bring these lectures. We have completely different lectures in Paris, in Princeton, but now we will deliver these 3 speeches here, and we'd like to, we will try our best not to take too much of your time, but your attention and your opinion will be very important for us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Nicola, you.
Dear colleagues, I'm Irma Дринов and I will be moderating today's event. So it is with great pleasure for me to give the word to Professor Gага Lomidze in his lecture on the poetics and politics of the Georgian modernism.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to thank you for coming. It's a great honor for me to be here and to present my paper to this amazing audience. And I would like to say also that at first this presentation, this paper was intended to be more analytical. Then I decided that it would be more relevant to prepare to present more introductory, because yeah, I think so. Everything's fine, right? All right. Poetics and politics of the Georgian modernism. It all started in Kutaisi, a city in western Georgia with an ancient past and certain type of ancient culture. In Kutaisi, the publication of the Blue Horns magazine caused a lot of noise. This was the first magazine of the Georgian symbolist group, Blue Horns. Young poets were criticized in the press for their pessimism, suicidality and erotic themes. Paolo Yashvili was the leader of this group and the editor of the magazine. He went to Paris, the birthplace of symbolism, and decided to spread the new ideas in his country. A Russian writer, Ilya Ehrenburg, recalls his meeting with Paolo in the famous Café de la Rotonde of Paris. Paolo was at the time a thin and slender 20-year-old young man. He kept asking me which cafe was Verlaine sitting in when Picasso will come. From the memoirs of Galation, an outstanding representative of Georgian symbolism, we learn that representatives of the Blue Horse came to the presentation of the magazine dressed in strange clothes. They attached rooster spurs to their jackets because they were shaped like a horn. Symbolism can be seen in the very name Blue Horns. Blue is the color of poetry, and the horn is a symbol of bohemian life. Color was of great importance to the symbolists. Poets have often used clothes in seemingly inappropriate manner, but it was all done to impress an audience. Paolo Yashvili said, "I'm tired of the yellow Dante." Galation wrote about purple snow. Georgian symbolists lived bohemian lives. In Kutaisi at the time you could often see young people dressed strangely. One of them, Tizian Dabidze, had a certain carnation, had a red carnation attached to his chest, where he can, here we can recall Mayakovsky's yellow scarf, Théophile Gautier's red vest, or Oscar Wilde's green carnation. The preface of the Blue Horns magazine revealed the eccentricity of the group members, rejection of the art of the past, interest in new technologies and self-praise. They claim to be the heirs of the European avant-garde. The Book of Masks by French symbolist poet Remy de Gourmont was held in great esteem. They were already familiar with this book. Representatives of Blue Horse believed that the artistic nature of Georgians, their ability to transform themselves, corresponded to this requirement of symbolism. Нино is an example of such transformation. He published poems with erotic content under the pseudonym of a fictitious woman, Irma Rattiani. Representatives of the Blue Horse kept the author's identity a secret. This kind of play was common among modernists. With this, Нино seemed to repeat the case of Guillaume Apollinaire, where the French poet once wrote under the pseudonym of a woman, Louise Lalande. The emergence of symbolism had its external and internal reasons in Georgia. On the one hand, events unfolding in the external world, and on the other hand, peculiarities of Georgian character. David Kakabadze, a famous Georgian modernist painter and theoretician, wrote in this connection, by force of national appreciation, a nation receives what can be adjusted to its national peculiarities and is closely linked to it. In this regard, symbolism can be bring a lot to the Georgian nation. And first and foremost, word that has been forgotten in our country. He referred to love of masks as a national peculiarity of Georgians. The concept of masks in general is a neo-Baroque phenomenon. After Georgia gained independence, creative people moved to Tbilisi. Tbilisi is becoming a city of poets. At this time, art cafes are already opening in Tbilisi. In Cafe International, Georgian symbolist poets declared that Tbilisi is the only city of poets, and poetry exists only in Tbilisi. Motif of closeness of traditions can be seen in the manifesto Нино wrote for the Blue Horse magazine, and I'm quoting him, Paris is the holiest country after Georgia. This phrase makes a clear reference to Georgia's place on the world's cultural map, which is definitely due to its ancient traditions, which is further developed in Tizian Dabit's demand of making Georgian art and literature European and adjusting Georgian poetry to the European radius. I'm quoting him also, I put the rose of Hafiz in Prudhomme's vase. I plant Baudelaire's flowers of evil in Besikis gardens. Besikis, Georgian poet of Baroque period, and what Tizian Dabitzi described as Georgia's national resurrection in his essay published in the second issue of the Blue Horse magazine, implying the prominent positions Georgia occupied in the past. Georgian symbolists popularized the images, ideas, and works of Western romanticists or symbolists. They not only mentioned with great respect names of Edgar Poe, Verlaine, Rimbaud, Baudelaire, Mallarmé, Apollinaire, and Oscar Wilde, but also translated their works. For example, Нино translated Arthur Rimbaud, Galactian Dabitze translated Byron, Shelley, and Verlaine. Georgian modernists found support in the remote past that could justify their allegations that it's Tbilisi that is the world capital, not Paris. To prove this, they tried to reach the origins of the civilization. Georgia Phoenix, the title proper of this manifesto of Georgian futurists, emphasizes a vision of the future and the importance of the vision as a renovator. The aspiration towards renovation was expressed also in a search for roots. Tizian Dabitze wanted to discover links to Chaldea, and Grigor Rabakidze was searching for phenomenon. Connections between the East and West were also topical in Georgian modernism from the very beginning. Grigor Rabakidze wrote, "Western Europe is dear to us, but we cannot say the East for the sake of the West. It would be better to make their wedding with a Georgian feast." Interest in the East was keen also in the era of Romanticism, such a position of modernism definitely shows opposition to logocentrism as a manifestation of Occidentalism, where patriarchal position, positivism and rationalism held leading positions. Preference was given to Orientalism as non-determinist and arboreal in nature and irrational in origin, because as it became clear in the era of modernism that truth maintained by the Western logocentric world proved to be erroneous. It was no accident that Tbilisi became the arena for modernist trends, because all this merged in Tbilisi and their nature was determined by features of Tbilisi. On the one hand, traditional aristocratic representationalism, and on the other, the layer of craftsmen in the city who were mostly of Eastern origin and of extremely artistic and inflammatory nature, so characteristic of artistic bohemia, both being merged in it, working polyphonically as an orchestra. There was, on the one hand, the avant-garde nature of intellectual life in Tbilisi, oriented on innovations, encompassing artistic avant-garde as an aesthetic position, and on the other hand, the deep roots of the traditional Oriental Christian culture. This multi-layer nature, layers covering each other, and the merge of local, Western and Eastern, innovative and traditional, created a fantastic and open nature of Tbilisi, which determined Georgian Tbilisi avant-garde, and having rejected the private nature of creation, came onto the streets. It decided to influence society of Tbilisi and attack their conscience, but it was Tbilisi proper that provoked all of this. Cafes opened mainly on Golovin Avenue, present Rustaveli Avenue. Lively creative processes take place here. Lectures on the poetry are given here. One of the most popular cafes was Kimerion. Kimerion is a unique case since only the frescoes of Paris Coupole and Kimerion have been preserved in almost complete form. During this period, Georgia became the cultural center of the Caucasus. It's home to an outstanding creative community. The walls of the cafe are painted by Нино Миндиашвили, David Kakabadze, Ilyas Danevich, Yuri Degen, Sergei Sudeikin. Concerts and theater performances are held every day. The former chief of the Prince of Oldenburg, Chief Papa Vanichka, offers guests dishes of Asian and European cuisine. The French singer Margarita also sang in one of the cafes. Margarita, whom the artist Nico Pirosmani fell in love with. Maybe after one of his performances, he decided to paint a portrait of Margarita. Pirosmani itself was discovered by French artists living in Georgia at the time, Ilya and Kirill Zdanevich. During the First World War, they lived in Georgia. About Tbilisi at the time, the British journalist Karl Bihov wrote, "Here you will find very strange people, poets and artists from Petrograd and Moscow, philosophers, dancers, singers, actors." Pavloyashvili, the leader of young Georgian poets, climbed onto a chair on the main boulevard of Tbilisi in the International Cafe and said out loud, "Not Paris, but Tbilisi, the center of world culture." In the 1910s and 20s, artists and writers from different parts of the world came to Tbilisi. Poets and artists fleeing the Russian Revolution gathered in Tbilisi. Ilyas Danevich, Alexei Khrushchev, and Igor Terentiev created new artistic union, 41 degrees in Tbilisi, to denote the geographical latitude of Tbilisi. Titian Abidze recalled that artists and poets from Russia cried with joy when they saw electric lighting. It was here that the legend that Georgia was an oasis arose. Symbolism in Georgia will be replaced by expressionism, themes of fear, anxiety, hopelessness, despair, sadness, disappointment, and pathetic mood. Nietzsche had a major influence on expressionists with his idea of dead God, Superman, and eternal return, and Apollonian and Dionysian concepts, which were based on myth and renovation. Return to myth is a sign of renovation for expressionists. The Nietzschean conception of eternal return proved to be appropriate for Georgian modernists' desire and aspiration towards renovation, which becomes obvious in Titian Abidze's essay with Blue Horns. Although he doesn't mention Nietzsche in it, the same is true in our short essay titled Declaration of Blue Horns, published in the Barikadi newspaper, and I'm quoting, Adam Mickiewicz said, those who lost their motherland are able to understand love of the motherland. That's the love of Georgian poets and understandable, because Georgia has been lost for dozens of centuries. This is why Georgian messianism will always be justified. This may be a curse for the nation. This may be a twist of fate. However, a nation that fails to create today a culture that will be universal in nature and that will not be justified at the level of humankind is going to disappear. The demand of overcoming the ethnographic boundaries of Georgian culture bears the same meaning. Konstantin Gamsakhourdia, a representative of the expressionist movement, regarded myth as a source of renewal. Crisis is the waking up of our soul from the magic of dreaming and myths. Crisis, it's being without myth for us. Non-being was a myth from the very beginning. Everything created in this world was created with myth. Myth preceded the being of humans. Myth were the initial intention of God, man, and art. And when everything becomes nothing, what will remain will probably be myth. Georgian modernists regarded the recognition of the circular time of the classical era as an opportunity for Georgia's national revival, and the internationalization of Georgian culture on the one hand, and the promotion of pagan cultures compared to Christian culture on the other. Like Nietzsche, Konstantin Gamsakhourdia regarded Christianity as a religion of losers and wanted to replace it with pagan love of life and Dionysian exhilaration. Like Nietzsche, Gamsakhourdia regarded Christian morality as unacceptable, as it is morality of the weak, aimed at defeating strong people and regarding weakness and fear as a basis for Christian love. The prose of the period is distinguished by an abundance of works of small form. This is a sign of the beginning of Impressionism in Georgian literature. Impressionism in Georgian literature is associated with the name of Nicholas Kipanidze. He wrote the story without a sail, in which he sets out his creative principles. The author avoids detailed description. In his works, paragraphs are short, and he often uses one phrase instead of a long sentence. Here his task is to convey the general impression with mood. In this sense, Nicholas Kipanidze's writing style has much in common with Impressionist painting. On the one hand, Nicholas Kipanidze himself writes that his goal was to evoke the mood of the reader. Georgian avant-garde is often called Tbilisi avant-garde because avant-garde and modernism in general emerged in the bosom of the urban culture. Artists and writers from various regions of the world gathered in Tbilisi, as I already mentioned, and it's also it is easy to say that Tbilisi was one of the centers of avant-garde in southeastern Europe, the Caucasus, or Russia. The first soiree was held in the building of the Conservatoire in 1922, and a manifesto called Georgia Phoenix was published. The manifesto bore traces of Italian and Russian futurism. The signatories threatened to destroy the art of the past. Phoenix symbolized the revival of the legacy of the past on the one hand, and on the other was oriented on the future, which is absolutely natural for futuristic aesthetics. Georgian futurists protest against the past were mostly confined to their aesthetic position. I'm quoting, electric light put out of the moon, and the 20th century no longer sheds tears because of sentiments. We fell in love with a mob rusted in the emissions of vehicles, applauding to the revolution in excitement. We fell in love with the noisy city, flashing eyes at night with an arsenal. We did not stop in front of museums and monuments, and we are creating Georgia's future that has no time or space. To promote their ideas, Georgian futurists resorted to the art of performance. The first futuristic magazine, H2 SO4, was founded in Georgia in 1924. H2 SO4 was symbolic, as futurists wanted to destroy all art with this acid. Particular importance and stress was given not only to the content of the text, but also to the visual. Great attention was paid to design in periodicals. They specifically chose the font and often printed text in different font sizes. The so-called handmade books have become especially popular. Artisan poets believed that the author's handwriting gave additional weight to each text, and individuality was lost in printed letters. They often used different fonts. Punctuation marks were often omitted, and different numbers were depicted instead. The works were based on meaninglessness and absurdity. Along with new technologies, futurists praised cinematography. In this regard, Kote Mikhaberidze's film My Grandmother is indicative, in which there are many elements of futuristic aesthetics. In this experimental film, the director predicted the dominance of a totalitarian regime in the Soviet Empire. That is why it's no coincidence that the film My Grandmother was banned, and Kote Mikhaberidze was deprived of the rights to make films. I would like to present this a short the short episode from this film, and I will continue then. But there is no sound, but I think it's okay. And we can continue. Georgian Dadaists search for manifestation of zala, other linguistic experiments in sound symbolism and language creation of Russian Cuba futurist poets such as Vladimir Khlebnikov and Alexei Kruchonik. Zala is a non-referential phonetic entity which is with its own ontology. They searched for manifestations of zala in folklore. Attention should be paid to the use of so-called folk language by the narrator in The Smile of Dionysius, a novel by Constantine Gamsahurdia. The different fonts, but I will try to recite it, which has its roots in folklore and seems to be close to Dadaist aesthetics. Azalgani, this word has no meaning at all, but still. Azalgani, Zazalgani, Asni, Parsni, Pasalgani, Serustem, Furustem, Ikarti, Mikarti, alasmerti arahmerti, which is followed by the comments in the shape of an admonition. If my speech is indeed incoherent, I'm quoting, and if I'm a master of dark utterances, this is because this world is incoherent and dark, which gives political connotations to this passage. Due to the loss of Georgian independence in 1921, Konstantin Gamsahurdi and his friends wore black national costumes as a sign of national mourning and protest. The situation has been changing since the late 1920s. The Blue Horse group has been disbanded, and everyone will continue to work separately. Then Yosef Grishashvili, a poet and historian, will write a poem with a sad mood, a farewell to Old Tbilisi, and quoting, "Old Tbilisi, my goals, I don't have them anymore. If only I could see you in my heart. It was decided that I should change my lifestyle. Old Tbilisi, I leave you, goodbye." This is no longer Tbilisi with its artistic cafes, where creative evenings took place until the morning. The cultural life of Free Georgia lasted for 4 years. By the 1930s, the people who laid the foundation of the Tbilisi avant-garde found themselves in exile and concentration camps. Many of them were killed. Auliyashvili committed suicide. Those who succeeded, like Grigor Bakidze, emigrated. Ladu Budiashvili, a famous painter, also moved to Paris. At the time, his character still looked straight. Later, after returning to Soviet Georgia, he began to draw people avoiding looking directly. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Professor Gага Lomidze for his wonderful presentation. If any of you has any questions, I would ask you to keep them for the end of the presentations, when we will be having a short discussion, depending on the time. And now it is with great pleasure to invite here Professor Irma Rattiani, who is going to share with us her research on the establishment and development of postmodernism in Georgian literature.
Now I will try to move your attention from Georgian modernism to Georgian postmodernism. The title of my presentation is the Establishment and Development of Postmodernism in Georgian Literature. Well, I should start from 1990s, because in the 1990s, after crashing the Soviet Empire, Georgia found itself involved in a civil war and the war with Abkhazia, which brought about bloodshed, death, and loss of our historical territories. Economic crisis, corruption, and political crisis reigned in the country, and consequently culture, art, and literature also shifted into the phase of creative crisis. Well, the collapse of Soviet Union, the fall of Berlin Wall, the monolithic and currently divided territories in the Central Europe were the signs of cardinal changes. From the viewpoint of literary processes, intertextuality becomes predominant, which implies inner relations of the text directed towards the national and international cultural area. The process becomes especially comprehensive in the conditions of open boundaries and gradually moves to the world scale. Intertextuality and concepts related to it are widely introduced. Literary products becomes far more eclectic, resembling a collage based on associations and allusions. The fall of political authorities is followed by the total devaluation of the authorities. The method of irony and self-irony is used increasingly. High ideals are replaced by pseudo-ideals. Deconstruction of the intellectual world begins. Postmodernism is fitting precisely the psychology of the society in crisis. So, postmodernism worldwide suits the source of searching and discovery of new national and cultural identities. Georgian literature of the post-Soviet period accepts this challenge. Postmodernism appears as an excellent means not only for reconstruction of the cultural consciousness being in a path of crisis, but also of overcoming the Soviet canon, which was very important for our literature. Therefore, in the 1990s, a great part of post-Soviet Georgian literature has moved to the area of postmodernist sensitivity. However, the process started a bit earlier, on the edge of 1980s, 1990s, during the period of, it was this threshold of radical political, economic, and cultural transition. I will quote my colleague Gага Lomidze that generation of Georgian writers who worked during this transition period can be compared to the Generation X, the generation for whom personal freedom and human rights were the most important. They decided to change the injustice of the world. Poet and musician Irma Rattiani called this generation a Gagarin generation. Exactly, this generation stood at the origins of Georgian postmodernism. In late 1980s, Irma Rattiani, who called himself king in the late period, unfortunately he passed in 2006, along with poet Kovaniishvili, founded the poetic order Reactive Club. The idea of Reactive Club was quite swimming, a swimming against the flow. Rattiani became the leader of this new trend. Irma Rattiani's poetry and his songs had a revolutionary significance with its simplicity and experimentalist mood. His narrative was full with tragic elements and with cynicism as well. However, his poetry echoes not only the pains, but also the hopes of this generation. Postmodern Georgian culture and literature was assigned a mission to express those pains and hopes. However, the earliest pure postmodernist text, Love of Martyrs, was written by Dato Barbakadze in the beginning of 1990s. By means of postmodernist rearrangement and combination, traditional Georgian literary text, in particular Georgian hagiography, and text of Georgian classic writer Vasily Barnov with the same title were offered on a specific conceptual axis. Following a new trend, various directions of postmodern art were developed in the late 1990s, such as pop art, hyperrealism, happening, social art, and etc. Georgian postmodernist literature has accepted all important aesthetic methods in the trend: simulacrum, double coding, irony, parodia, liberalization of artistic language, etc., etc. Thanks to these artistic methods, Georgian authors successfully coped with such postmodernist issues as crisis, distrust, simulation, deconstruction of classical text with the effect of parody and so farce. Postmodernism became a substantial and dimensional trend in Georgia, which generated various stylistic models: narrative, anti-narrative, ironical, parodies, and etc. A typical manifestation of Georgian narrative postmodernist discourse are texts by Agamarchiladze, distinguished by coherent artistic narration performed in the basic postmodernist manner. Parody and interpretation of classical, familiar plots and characters, use of the affect of allusions, unification of the context of the authors, characters and readers by means of irony. The writer constantly moves between reality and pseudo-reality, mystification and phantasmagoria, allusion and detective story, and etc. His novels, and you can see the titles of these novels on the screen, as well as individual stories and documentaries, they really fit the taste of Georgian readers, and not only Georgian readers. It should be noticed the writer is following the best traditions of postmodernism, resorts to the interpretation of the individual periods of Georgian cultural and social life. Beyond contrasting collages and arrangements, one identifies the Georgian reality, often historical reality. But what is more important about Gага Lomidze, and what should be said, is that he is a first Georgian author who responded to the aggravated political situation in the Caucasus region. A clear example to this is his novel Journey to Karabakh, which was written in 1992. It was written in the postmodernist manner. In this really highly dramatic text, the writer touches upon the painful issue of Armenian and Azerbaijani people, the problem of Nagorno-Karabakh, and interprets it from the viewpoint of ordinary Georgian people, boys. Gага Lomidze is one of the most translated Georgian authors. Example for anti-narrative postmodernist manner are texts by Zaza Burchuladze, who actually, similar to some Western postmodernist texts, his novels are anti-narrative. The writer points to the impossibility to narrate as everything has already been written. However, along with the postmodernist tasks, the tasks of this undoubtedly very talented author are a reflection of the surrounding reality, conceptual prose, where scandalous behavior is a specific form to respond to the reality. The effort to shock the reader is observed in Zaza Burchuladze's prose with all its postmodern standards. Also, the prose of Lasha Bugadze by Lasha Bugadze should be brought here. His stories, novels, and plays are distinguished by extraordinary reception of the reality as well as stylistic diversity. The writer effectively uses artistic means, characteristic of postmodernism, not infrequently includes them into traditional literary models. One of the most very scandalous novels of him was the short story, was the first Russian, which could be a kind of example of historiographic metaprose written in the postmodern manner. So, postmodernism, we can say, with its philosophy of negation and perception of the world as total falsehood, proved to be an excellent refuge for post-Soviet Georgian writers facing destruction, corruption, wars, and frustrations. It reflected the nihilism and suspicion that Georgian literature showed the outside world. Among the authors who also are very important in this period, unfortunately I cannot cover all of them, are Potejandrieri, Irakli Lomori, Zal Samadashvili, Archie Pikoze, who is loyal to Georgian classical narrative, also social and political journalism and ethnography. Postmodernist discourse became very popular in modern Georgian poetry, presenting various concepts and techniques. As I understand, some representatives of Georgian postmodern poetry already are known here in Bulgaria. I will name them now. Radia Maglobeli, Shotaya Tashvili, Gabana Khutsrishvili, Maya Sarishvili, and etc. and etc. And this is a poetry without borders and frames, Radia Maglobeli stated. Modern Georgian poets are translated and published in prestigious international journals and magazines, and they are often participants of different literary festivals. So special place should be provided to this man, the Besik Haranauli, who is already classic of Georgian literature. He was a man who established vers libre in Georgian literature in 1970s, but actually he moved to postmodernist manner in late 1990s and 2000s. And his books like Amba Bessarion and Epigraph of Forgotten Dreams and Hyperboles and a book of hyperboles and metaphors, they became very popular. They're very important texts of the late Georgian, of the modern Georgian literature, they are written, most of them, in the postmodernist style. Women authors are very important in this period. I should say that women authors who are involved in postmodernist writing, they actually they replaced the topics which were offered by the Georgian women writers in 1970s and 80s with bold experiments and stylistic innovations. Their literature is closer to the general concept of feminist discourse and is less bound by conceptual and moral cliches. Modern Georgian feminist prose displays not only closeness to the international standard, but also pronounced individuality based on Georgian cultural markers. That's how these things were developing. However, before I go to the last part of my presentation, I must say that one of the most important lines of Georgian postmodernism became the problem of national identity. So Datu Turashvili, who was one of the leaders of rebellion young generation on the end of 1980s, beginning 1990s, he moved to the literary space with the same thematic. The most well-known short stories are Jean's Generation. The writer focuses on topics ranging from tragic reception of the society, devoid of any values, to the problem of the national identity. The issue of national identity and national values becomes significant from the mid-1990s, increases in the Georgian literature of the beginning of the 21st century, the more so that it faces new difficulties of political transformation and shifting. As you all know, in November of 2003, a group of young politicians prepared and carried out a peaceful revolution in Georgia. And the name of this revolution was the Rose Revolution. If you will have any questions, I will answer this question, but now I will just go to another passage. The Rose Revolution proved that the influence of revolutions on culture can be diverse. It is defined by the means and objectives of the revolution as well as forms of reaction to it. One of the most positive results of the Rose Revolution was the enlarging of cultural process. The Rose Revolution boded open borders and to cultural isolation and the start of the free creative work. However, despite some successful stop of the reformatory government, in 2008, in August, Georgia faced one more terrible war in historical Samachablo, or so-called South Ossetia. So unfortunately, it was a result of the military actions of Russia on the territory of this historical province, and Georgia, this part of Georgia was isolated from the country. So this throbbing problem of Samachablo, alongside with the problem of Abkhazia, logically moved towards the Georgian postmodernist fiction. And here we have war discourse as one of the most important discourses of Georgian postmodernism. Occupied territories, refugees, disrupted historical integrity becomes a significant part of Georgian postmodernist literature. This topic is found in the works of writers who physically suffered this hardship of the war, and also those who were only spiritually linked with this process. Here should be named Guramo Gisharia, author whose text Return to Sukhumi, Rain in Broadcasting Sukhumi, and other stories describe the worst experience of Georgian people in the post-Soviet period, the war in Abkhazia. But, for example, young writer, Tamtam Melashvili, female writer, who actually was not in the war in Samachablo, she was able to understand this war and to be linked to this tragic process. She wrote this story, Counting Out, and actually this story got the prize for young writers in Germany, I mean German National Prize for Young Writers. And in this story, the war is to a greater extent a background in the line of the subject, but it is significantly perceived in the common compositional pattern. Georgian postmodern authors are very popular now. They are very close to Georgian readers, and actually they are gaining not only national but international fame also. I'm proud to say that Akan Orchiladze, who is 6-time winner of Saba Literary Prize, was nominated for a Nobel Prize this year by Institute of Georgian Literature, because it is our institution in Georgia which is nominating for Nobel Prize writers. I wish him really good luck. And one of the best achievements of Georgian modern literature, contemporary literature, was of course the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2018, where our contemporary literature and basically postmodernist Georgian literature was very well presented, mostly in the German language. On the ending, I can say that it can be noted with confidence that Georgian postmodern literature, with its topics and stylistic models, discourse layers and objectives, diverse, multifaceted, and at the same time highly oriented on its own values, is a full-fledged member of the global literary world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Rattiani. After the presentations on the Georgian modernism and postmodernism, we now move towards the drama of displacement in contemporary Georgian literature, a lecture by Professor Нино Миндиашвили.
Я приветствую вас и благодарю за очень теплый прием. Как уже отметили, тема моей лекции – травма множества в современной грузинской литературе. Современная грузинская литература характеризуется многими новшествами в контексте тематическом, жанровом, либо концептуальном. С 90-х годов 20 века в грузинской литературе произошли значительные изменения, которые были обусловлены с одной стороны эпохальными катаклизмами и с другой стороны концептуальными процессами. Пришедшее на литературную арену поколение обосновало новое видение, оригинальное отношение к событиям, неоднозначность выражения, эпатаж и личностные интерпретации. Литературный процесс стал более интересным и многообразным и является предметом исследования ученых разных отраслей, так как в нем отображены эпохальные события с одной стороны и с другой стороны концептуальные парадигмы, осмысление которых с точки зрения культурно-литературных исследований дает возможность сделать много интересных заключений. Постсоветская грузинская литература – однородный нарратив, в котором сочетаются эпохальные рефлексии и травматические концепты, осмысление которых важно в контексте коллективной памяти. В рамках лекций нами особое внимание будет уделено созданным за последний период романам «Птичка не вылетит», автором является Гага Ломидзе, и «Ты дома», автор Гага Ломидзе. В текстах авторы вместе с ни одной травматической парадигмой представляют образ беженца как травмированного объекта. На основе указанных художественных текстов мы хотим представить литературную репрезентацию эпохальных событий, концепты беженства как коллективной травмы, авторскую интерпретацию травмы как парадигмы. Рассмотрение романов релевантно в контексте теоретических рамок постколониальных травм, травм беженства, победы и коллективной травмы. Применяя острых эмоциональных пассажей, авторам удается на фоне личных травм выделить маркеры беженства как коллективной травмы. Происходящие в мире война и конфликты миллионов людей сделали беженцами. Это нанесло на их групповое сознание клеймо, которое невозможно стереть. С одной стороны, воспоминания, содержащие травму, и с другой стороны, совершенно новое окружение, которое не смогло стереть вызванную беженством стигму, создало совершенно другие, непривычные обстоятельства. Известный американский исследователь, один из авторов теории травм, Александр, развивает свое размышление о том, что в 20 веке происходящие войны сделали непременным осмысление воспоминаний, содержащих травм и борьбу против них. На теориях травматической памяти и постколониализма была основана теория о беженцах французским исследователем Клайром Галлианом, которая подразумевает осмысление образа гонимого как травматического объекта в художественной литературе. В связи с данным вопросом в научном дискурсе ни один ученый выражает свое мнение. Среди них особенно интересными представляются исследования Клайра Галлиана, Мария Дринова, Фредерика Детуэ, Мелиссы Чаплина, Венедикта Литерье, Оливера Джока, Валерия Анишенковой, Арина Стена и других. Теорию травмы победы мы считаем интересной для совершенствованного осмысления романа. Когда общество борется нищить за себя, для достижения глобальной цели коллектив объединяется, одолевает уйма на один взгляд неодолимых противоречий, препятствует и считает, что для благосостояния страны единственная правильная стратегия есть действительно стремиться к той цели, например, добиться независимости. Вследствие сложных перипетий достигнутая победа образуется как травма, так как социальные катаклизмы становятся основой всеобщего нихилизма. Нужно подчеркнуть то обстоятельство, что война и беженство – актуальная тема не только для грузинской литературы. Клайр Галлиан считает, что художественный образ беженца в литературе той или иной страны – носитель эпохальных признаков, и его изучение обязательно с разных ракурсов, а особенно с учетом постколониальных теорий. Необходимо также сказать, что в 90-х годах 20 века текущие политические процессы в Грузии определили тематические интерпретации литературы. А литература о беженцах все больше масштабно отразилась в художественном дискурсе. На эту тему пишут Нино Миндиашвили, Лекции, Нино Миндиашвили, Зейнабметребели, Резота Букашвили, Мзияхета Гуришота Дарбуашвили и другие. Нам весьма интересны вышеуказанные романы, в которых рядом с другими вопросами травма беженства представлена особенно реалистично и дает возможность разных интерпретаций. Героиня романа Теоны Долинджашвили Ната есть член того общества, которое помнит все. Огнем окруженный Сухуми, Чуберский перевал, дорогу, ведущую к изгнанию. И стигму вынужденного перемещения, освободиться от которого персонажу никак не получается. Беженка из Абхазии, девушка Ната, в 6-летнем возрасте бежит из огнем окруженного Сухуми вместе с близкими. Хотя живет постоянно с теми болезненными воспоминаниями, которых даже время не смогло стереть. И более того, в детстве принудительно навязанная травма навсегда изменила ее мировосприятие. И уже потом ей, как известному фоторепортеру, война как тень вечно преследует. Ната, дата рождения 17 июня 1987 года. Так начинается роман. Будто дата, которая совсем без претензий и которую автор принимает как художественную деталь, подготавливает читателя к чтению трагических историй. Особенно интересно, что автор расширяет масштабы, отображающую коллективную травму, и действие происходит в 2 географических ареалах в разное время и в разных пространствах – в Грузии и в Сирии. Представленная в тексте модель хронологического типа подчеркивает глобальную проблему и ее масштаб, поскольку война везде одинаково страшна – и в Грузии, и в Сирии. Ее последствия разрушают человеческую психику, образуют и формируют коллективную травму. На войне меняются не только в мирное время установленные писанные и неписанные моральные законы и порядки. Война меняет саму человеческую суть, разрушает вечную человеческую природу. Но об этом думала я многократно. Может быть, человеческая суть и природа на самом деле такова, и война называет все своими именами. Ставит автор риторический вопрос и на фоне разных историй, ужасающих, полных трагизмом новостей и пассажей, старается показать читателю, как на войне происходит девальвация ценностей, рушение нравственных и моральных категорий и преобразование людей. Тем более, что, как отмечает автор, в основе произведения лежат реальные истории из Абхазии, из Сирии и гонимых людей. Оригинальный сюжет дает возможность читателю осмыслить в глобальном контексте представленных в романе уйму проблем. Из Грузии в Сирию по особо важному заданию посланная Ната, она известный фотограф, носительница травмы беженства. Приехавшей в Алеппо война напоминает ей прошлое, которое прочно впечатано в ее сознательном и в подсознательном. Война возвращает Нату в детство. Оживляются трагические картины в огне окруженного Сухуми и Чуберского перевала. И героиня романа их осознает как в настоящее время происходящих событий. В ее разуме, подобно кинокадрам, меняются смерть, страх, голод и опять смерть. Облики матери и отца и сестры остались глубокой раной в памяти навсегда. Единственную сестру унес в жертву Чубери, которая, будучи малолетней, не смогла перенести сложные условия. Мать – настоящая героиня, которая ради своих детей выдержала все. Находящаяся в беженстве стала сильнее, чтобы как-то выжить. Отец – Натана огромная боль. Он, человек, у которого отобрали достоинство, не смог преодолеть собственную беспомощность и утонул в омуте безнравственности. Писатель на примере Натаного отца рисует, как война меняет людей, как происходит девальвация ценностей, как люди не справляются с коллективной травмой, с изгнанием, с потерей собственного дома, с чувством вины и беспомощности. И как они, полностью обессилены и уничтожены, наконец погибают. Находящая уже в Тбилиси Ната, носительница стигмы беженства, формированию которой способствовало преимущество тот социум, в котором она оказалась. Сложно без эмоций прочитать раздумья Наты, в которых, по нашему мнению, автор объединил общий облик людей, которые прошли через войну, то есть носители коллективной травмы. Родители Наты представляют то общество, которому удалось выбраться из империи. Оно добилось независимости, хотя победа не оказалась приносящей счастья. Боль, притеснение, буллинг, постоянное самооправдание приходилось Нате. Обосноваться в новом социуме было непростым, более того, даже невозможным. Издевательская улыбка сверстников подчеркивала ее беженство и состояние беспомощности. Необходимо отметить, что Нино Миндиашвили в разных аспектах выделяет образ беженца, как носителя коллективной травмы. Приговор Нино Миндиашвили как писателя жесток, хотя если учесть представленный выше теоретический дискурс, он объективен. Освободиться от стигмы беженства невозможно. Героиня романа Гага Ломидзе член постсоветского общества, которая на себя и на свою семью испытала все проявления коллективной травмы. И, наверное, знаменательно тоже, что природная катаклизма, землетрясение радикально изменила ее жизнь. Неопределенная судьба ее единственного ребенка еще больше обостряет участь и так обремененной травмой Ни, которая с надеждой смотрит в будущее более смутное, чем ей кажется. Люди делятся на двое – войну прошедшие и войну не прошедшие, хотя среди них есть и другие. Между войной и миром временем расположенные мосты на волоске, качели времени. Этим эпиграфом начинается роман Гага Ломидзе «Ты дома» и сразу же располагает читателя к сложному, эмоциональному и оказавшему давление нарративу. Войну прошедшие или войну не прошедшие мосты на волоске или качели времени определяют эмоциональные настроения читателя. Основной наратор романа Ния, которая делится с читателем как своими сложнейшими переживаниями и эмоциями, так и общественным бытом и происшедшими новостями. Человек по природе своей, рассказывающая сущность. Пересказ вместе с описанием подразумевает интерпретацию, целенаправленно или неосознанно. Значение придается предметам, фактам, случившимся явлением прошлого. Прошлое Ни цепью связано с настоящим, так что часто сложно определить причинно-следственную связь. Хотя очевидно, что персонаж устал от того социума, достойным членом которого является и сам. Часто в диалогах, обращенных к своему больному ребенку, она дает определение нарративу, отражающему события прошлого времени и современности. Исследователь Алида Осман считает, что если не будет создаваться тексты, отражающие события, то какими бы трагическими они ни были, не смогут сформироваться как коллективные травмы, потому что на современное общество оказывает воздействие не прошлое само собой, а репрезентация событий прошлого. Эта репрезентация создается, распространяется и применяется в специальных культурных рамках и политической ситуации. Писатель посредством войну не прошедшей и войну прошедшей Демной говорит то, что ему хочется сказать. Демна другой, потому что он прошел войну, так понимает Ния. Демна ни на кого не похож. Демна предпочитал молчать, плохие новости оставлял у себя, я тоже не настаивала. А плохие новости в обществе, которые носители коллективной травмы, связаны с войной, гонением и жизнью. В романе писатель действие развивает в контексте трех персонажей. Темна в тексте парадигмическая модель беженца, человека, которого писатель представляет в разных ракурсах. По нашему мнению, также важно то обстоятельство, что не прямо, но война осмыслена как одна из главных тем романа. Война закончилась, хотя прошлое отказывается уходить и снова врывается в настоящее. Оно возвращается и ощущается, как будто вчера произошло. Мужний беженец из Абхазии, соответственно, носитель коллективной травмы и стигмы. Писатель отображает, с одной стороны, интерпретации отношения грузинского общества к беженцам, и с другой стороны, представляет хронологию, насколько сложно обосноваться изгнанным в новом социуме. В семье Ниидемни случается несчастье. Их единственный ребенок, Габриэла, вследствие землетрясения падает в кому. В случившемся Ния обвиняет мужа, которого в этот момент не было рядом с дочерью. Новая жизнь начинается с больным ребенком, но без Демни. Ния с самого начала находится в самооборонной репрезентации. Как исследователь Гиршберг отмечает, самой крайней формой самооборонной репрезентации является само отрицание существования травматического события. В таком случае и жертвы не существует. Хотя поэтапно героиня вынуждена заглянуть правде в глаза и принять ее. Демни, он, по пониманию нее, не виновен, Ния не хочет покинуть, терять с одной стороны, а с другой ей трудно общаться с ним. В нарративе романа часто представлена как несюжетный элемент дорога Демни от Сухуми до беженства, которая характеризуется сложнейшими морально-психологическими и социальными аспектами. Ключевой момент – та главная роль, которую Ния ждала всю жизнь. Роль, которая помогает ей осмыслить и переварить все. Ния проходит катарсис, что в первую очередь ведет ее к самооткрытию. Она обнаруживает и Демну, который на самом деле все это время был рядом с ней. Писатель острейше описывает момент снятия финальной сцены фильма, который мы должны считать даже кульминацией романа. Она стоит на перевале, за которым Абхазия, смотрит в белизну, за пределами которой ее погибший ребенок и весь потерянный мир. Смотрит, как ведьма и необычайно пожилая, и необычайно молодая. Последние слова персонажа главной роли, исполняемой Нией, воспринимаются особенными эмоциями. «Прости, вернись». Главная роль дает мне возможность пройти ту дорогу, которую прошел Демна. Травматическая память полностью отпечатана в ней. Демна для нее герой другого склада. Потому в ее сознательном и подсознательном все регулируется. Демна победил. Вместе с ним победила и Ния. Плоду их любви автор дает право на жизнь и на счастье. Автору Гага Ломидзе с большим мастерством удается выделить образ Демни как беженца, носителя коллективной травмы. Роман Нино Миндиашвили «Птичка не вылетит». Текст эпохального значения. В нем представлена литературная репрезентация событий в Грузии. Акцентирование на событии в Сирии дает возможность рассмотреть этот роман в общечеловеческом контексте. На виду литературной интерпретации коллективной травмы, травмы победы, теории беженства и постколониализма, что придает роману особенное значение. А тема гонения осмыслена как вечная стигма, преодолеть которую, по оценке автора, невозможно. Роман Нино Миндиашвили «Ты дома» также текст эпохального значения, в котором, правда, не прямо развернута тема войны, хотя из эпиграфа становится явным авторские подтексты. Внутренний слой романа служит именно представлению уцелевших в войне людей и являются литературной репрезентацией постсоветской эпохи. Писатель предлагает совершенно другую модель парадигмы беженца. Несмотря на то, что Дэнна достойный сын эпохи, в отличие от Наты, ему удается освободиться от стигмы беженства. В контексте исследуемого вопроса возможно призвать уйму материалов, рассмотрение которых непосильно в пределах одной лекции. Литературу на тему беженства обильно встречаем в современных художественных текстах последние 30 лет. Это, как уже отметили, имеет свое объективные и субъективные причины. Знаменательно, что литература такого типа обильно встречается как в поэзии, так и в прозе и в драматургии. Хотя однозначно, что парадигма беженства – это отзвук эпохи и политические события, как часто случается, свое отражение обрел в литературном дискурсе. Спасибо за внимание.
Dear colleagues, it is now time for any comments or questions you may have during the presentations. Yes, Professor Christoph. Would you please try to use this microphone to see if it works? It would be better for the recording.
Check. Yes, it works. So I have 3 questions, and all of them are for Mr. Gaga. I would like to ask you, you mentioned Dadaism and also symbolism and expressionism, but what about other modernist movements such as imagism and also surrealism? For example, in Bulgarian literature we have imagism, but we don't have surrealism. And maybe Acmeism also, like Akhmatova and Gumilyov. We have also here Acmeism in Bulgarian literature. Next question is about the novel, because in Bulgarian modernism there isn't something like modernist novel. Is it something like modernist novel in Georgian literature? And last one is, what is the legacy of modernism in contemporary postmodern Georgian literature? Is the movement influential, and what are the connections between contemporary literature and modernist tradition? Thank you.
Yes, Professor.
Thank you very much for your questions. As for the first question, I would say that there are no obvious examples of imagism or surrealism in Georgian literature. There might be some elements, but not this definitely and obviously surrealistic or other movements in Georgian literature. As for the novel, I don't remember if I mentioned, but there are mostly prominent novels. For example, they are of expressionist novels. This of 2 representatives of Georgian literature. One of them I mentioned, it was Konstantin Kamsakurdia. The other one is Grigor Bakidze, who emigrated to Europe. So that's why he survived. And he continued to work in Germany, and he started to write in German and publish in German because some novels are in German. I'm not sure if I answered these two questions. And the third one, I would like to say that as far as this modernist movement and Georgian avant-garde was forcefully seized by the Soviet regime and totalitarian regime, it was in the beginning of 1990s and at the end of 1980s that Georgian theoreticians and writers who tried to link their mode of thinking and to link their literature with that period that was forcefully seized, and that's why in the beginning of 1990s we have, strangely, we have Dada poetry or futuristic poetry, but that's because they believe that this way they should continue the natural process that was forcefully interrupted by totalitarian regime. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Mitrova.
I did like this joke about Mr. Gaga. I think it will probably be like that. So I have a more concrete question to you too. But before that, I want to say that I'm really impressed with the way we introduced your project, not especially these skeptic words about the popularization, because I don't like it. I think when it's focused on certain topics, he or she knows, when they're really devoted to what they do. We don't need all this popularization stuff, which will pass tomorrow. Nobody will remember it, but everybody who's been here will remember your ideas, and we'll look for them to see them printed, and that will be the real way, I think. And please, don't feel offended that there is not a big audience. Just people are at universities teaching, etc. But the good thing is that almost everybody here is really interested in your certain topics. So, one general question to concerning the more the contemporary Georgian literature, which is to you two dear ladies. So what about the translation? You spoke about postmodernism, you spoke about these traumatic topics. They're both issues of the last maybe 30 or 40 decades. Are Georgian literary works, poetry, prose, drama, are they enough translated abroad? And because I'll just ask afterwards to ask my more specialized question on symbolism. So,
well, I will answer for me, Нино. So, translations is a really very painful problem for our literature, because as you understand, it is connected with a very serious budget and funding, and that's why it is not easy to, to make this company. We have another problem also. During Soviet period, some authors were translated, of course, in Russian and then through Russian to other languages. And I'm very sorry to say that a lot of translations, they are very weak and they are very like a tendency, you know. So translator was not keeping the line of the author. So, for example, author like Нино, who was not very politically active like a figure, his novels are more or less well translated. But if there was a writer who was standing on a different position, like one of the best novelists of 20th century, who was executed in 1937. The translation of his texts, which are the best novels of 20th century Georgia literature, it is impossible to read because everything is lost, you know. So that's our problem. So if texts are translated in Russian and in Soviet period, and someone tries to translate from that translation, it means that we are lost in translation. So, as for contemporary situation, it needs money. Frankfurt, I just mentioned Frankfurt Book Fair. It was a big company for us. In 2018, Georgia was a guest country, and me and Gaga attended, as I remember, Gaga also, yeah, and we are members of the board and etc. And a lot of translations were done, but mostly modern, contemporary literature, because it was the request from the Frankfurt Book Fair. And we were very sorry that classic writers were not represented. So, if there will be budget, if there will be money, and I'm always saying, please do that. I'm always talking to different ministers, and they really maybe are trying, but yet it does not have the kind of, it's not a big company. So we need this translation company. Otherwise, yeah, yes. You understand.
So that's...
Thank you. Yes,
Thank you, Professor Ратиани. So that's the real subject of the proper popularization should be the government, not with our efforts. By the way, I only mention that our institute is participating in a program for developing and promotion of Bulgarian literary studies. It's not literature and literary studies, but also the problem of translations is strongly involved there, abroad. And here I would thank really helpfully to Professor Elka Trajkova, who has managed to come and attend this meeting. She is the head of the program for Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. And later we can exchange ideas about these things. And to Professor Lomidze, not to call him Mr. Gaga. So the question is very simple. From what I understood from your very interesting presentation, Georgian avant-garde movements clearly had connections with the Russian avant-garde, and it was flawed. But Georgian symbolists were the birth givers of symbolism. It was in Tbilisi, not in Paris. Was that right? Or maybe only these magazine manifestos. Yes. How did Georgian symbolists refer to Russian symbolists? That's my question. So they said, we are the truth, we are the Genesis, Tbilisi, no Paris. But what about Moscow and St. Petersburg?
Thank you very much for your question. As for Georgian symbolists, they were friends with representatives of Russian symbolism. I didn't mention that, but they also used to translate their works of Russian symbolists, and I wouldn't say that they were influenced by Russian symbolism, but somehow they might adapt it and reproduced their ideas somehow. But as for Paris, they thought that the beginning of symbolism and the birthplace of symbolism was Paris, France, and that's why they compared themselves. They exaggerated their abilities, but this way they wanted to over-present themselves, and this way they wanted to establish their place on the cultural map of the modernist literature and culture.
Thank you. And another little question. Sorry, I'm a specialist in modernism. No problem. So about this metaphor of the horn, in the blue horns,
Yes.
was it horn game or
Yes.
was it this?
It was a vessel. In Georgia, in many countries, they have vessel to drink wine.
Yes, sorry.
I should say that this year, in September, we will have very interesting conference, international symposium in Kutaisi, in the birthplace of Georgian modernism. And actually the title of the conference will be The Literature of Small Countries and the Global World. And the main line will be the birth of Georgian symbolism. And so if you will have time and if your schedule will allow, we will be really very happy to accept Bulgarian colleagues there. So I just remember that we have this conference about this.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions.
Thank you so much for these very enriching talks. I have a couple of questions to most of you, or maybe to all of you. First, because Professor Lomidze, you mentioned Mickiewicz, and as a specialist in Polish literature, I cannot help but ask about other romantic bards that might be influential or important to the Georgian modernist literature.
Polish?
Yeah, Polish. Yeah, because you mentioned Mickiewicz, maybe Slovatsky or even Norwid, I don't know, Kaczynski might be influential. And also, is it in any way, is Georgian modernism in any way neo-romantic by nature? In the way that the Polish one is simultaneously continuing the tradition, but also refitting it and distorting it. And also, are there any relations and interactions that might be influential between the Polish Moderna and figures such as Przybyszewski or Praskovich or anybody else there, Wyspiański maybe, I don't know, that have influenced or interacted with the Polish modernist authors? Professor Ratiani, because you mentioned about meta-prose, I wonder, this is my research interest, metafiction, so I wonder whether it has any stable place in Georgian literature as a tradition, not only in the postmodern times, but rather from before that, maybe. And also, can you name some author of the Georgian literature that you might define as the most global one? And if there is such, he or she, would he be comparable to anybody from world literature or Slavic in more detail? And also, I was really very interested in the topic of the Georgian treatment of the impossibility to narrate. And I can think of two possibilities at least. And I wonder which one was more similar in the Georgian case. and whether the roots are rather historical and political, maybe. For example, the case of Tadeusz Różewicz in Polish literature was that since there we have no world, there can be no literature and no poetry, of course. But also there is the case of Maurice Blanchot, for example, and the way he enacts the refusal to narrate, which is more performative than as a political act or something like that. So which one of these, or maybe something else, is the Georgian case? And also, I can't really read my notes here, but is there any tradition in the Georgian literature of the topic of trauma of displacement? Is there any interaction with the emigre literature, for example, from before? Because those were very interesting examples, but is there any, something that's building up from before that? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your questions. As for Polish representatives of symbolism, I wouldn't say that there was any influence, except the fact, I'm not sure, I don't exactly remember, but Grigol Rubakidze, who emigrated to Germany, he might have some contacts with some of the representatives of Polish modernism. He might have, but he was closely connected with German world. So his friends were among German writers, his circle. And as for the neo-romanticism, yes, I think that it's natural that as neo-romantic mood and aesthetics it is visible in Georgian symbolism, because verbally they they denounced everything that was created before. So, and even representatives of Romanticism too, they tried to distance themselves from them, but in fact there are a lot of allusions or quotations. And influence is really visible. Thank you.
As for metaphors, actually, as we talk of the same language, metaphors, you know that mostly was implemented in the period of modernism, and it is connected with modernism and postmodernism almost equally. However, I can tell you that in Georgian literature, during the modernist period, I don't think that it was activated in any way, because it is more connected with the understanding of metafiction, and that's why it is more intended in the postmodernist period. So I think that that is a real picture of that. As for the global authors, I will start from Grigol Rubakidze. Gaga mentioned him. Why? Because Rubakidze was pushed to immigrate from Georgia, and if I'm not mistaken, in 1927, he published his novel, Quelis Perangi, Snake's Skin, in Germany. And it was very important that the author of the preface to this novel was Stefan Zweig, who was so important writer for that period. And in later, Grigol Rubakidze was nominated for Nobel Prize, but Soviet government did everything to take his name from this nomination list, as we know for now. Also, for today, I think that as you are asking about the global authors, one of the most global authors is Нино Миндиашвили, Georgian writer, who lives in Germany, who writes in German language, and so she writes in German, and only after that she is translated to Georgian language. She's also a very popular place. So she is, I can tell you that, I mean, in this generation, she is a more global author for today. And what was the third question, Kate? I don't remember, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, the anti-narrative discourse.
Oh, anti-narrative discourse. Yeah, no, I said that it is characteristic to Zaza Burjuladze's prose, and also there was one very interesting author who wrote the novel Jazz's History of Jazz, Gага Lomidze. Unfortunately, he passed this year. He was very ill. So, but you know, this is very, for me, very interesting line in Georgian postmodernism. And I'm always saying that Zaza Burjuladze is one of the most talented authors of this generation. He was almost rejected by Georgian society when he published his first novels and books, because it is completely different technique. And this technique of anti-narrative, this comes from, it's more like performative part of his literature, because he wants to shock readers who wants to make this kind of shock influence on reader but he starts this very interesting process when you are reading and you are shocked and you are sometimes even insulted by author, then you feel how you are moving to this level of irony and self-irony, which brings you to the main idea of the text. That is his style, which I like really very much. But because of this epatage, because of this style, some like more conservative part of Georgian society was not very kind to him, let's say so. Well, I'm very proud that we have this kind of literature in our postmodernist reality. Thank you.
Can you translate for Нино your question? Okay. So the question was about the contemporary literature that might follow some tradition of angry literature before.
Спасибо за ваш интерес. Я, как уже отметила, это отступ эпохи. Мы даже можем назвать литература травмы, литература войны. Это начинается с 90-х годов 20 века. Происходящие моменты в Грузии отразились на литературе, так что это никак не связано с эмиграцией. Спасибо.
And Professor Luskano, please have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would allow myself a small provocation towards our guests. I will try the role of a mediator at this moment. I would say that actually the widespread translation of the Georgian symbolist group of their name as blue horns is actually misleading and quite inaccurate. Most scholars, of course, use it, both Georgian and British. Actually, some of the British are more careful. This is a paradox, of course. I would say that the exact translation should be not blue horns, but sky-colored drinking horns, simply because there are different words in Georgian for horn and for drinking horn. These are words that have nothing in common in terms of phonetics, etymology, and so on, and the same is with the colors. Lurgi is blue, and not cisberry, which is sky-colored. Okay, this was my provocation. And now I have a half question towards Professor Lomidze. So, Mr. Gaga, how do you think my hypothesis is, and I think that you almost said it, but not in a very articulate and clear way, that the pretense of Georgian symbolists that Tbilisi is the center of world literature can be supported this way. So, at least some of the symbolists, Georgian symbolists, said that Georgian symbolism, Georgian literature, Georgian culture, and the city of Tbilisi could become a wedding place for the East, namely Persia, and the West, namely France. I think it is an essay by Robakidze. So, am I right that this is the main reason for this self-extolment?
Thank you about the title. Blue Horse, yes, that's the much better version than Blue Horse. How did it? Sky-colored drinking horse. And as for the second question, I wouldn't say that they realized this, except Grigor Robakidze, because he was a theoretician too and philosopher too, that they realized that that was the reason that they contained Western and Eastern traditions in themselves. That was that made them distinctive from other symbolisms in Europe, for example. But I think that was the tendency, and also it came from Georgian character. I mentioned masks and playing and theatrical behavior of Georgians. Probably this was the way to. Probably it might be because they, in a certain way, it was a kind of self-defense, if we analyze in a psychological way. But in fact, if you ask me, I would say that one of the main reasons it was that because the difference with the connection of Western and Eastern aesthetics, it was one of the main reasons that why it is different from European modern symbolism. Okay.
So I just want to say that, in Rustaveli, when we are talking about Rustaveli, so we are always saying that this is, and I'm really proud to say that this is the first and the only text in European literature where the West and the East meet each other. Because this text, I mean, conceptually, this is European chivalry romance, but poetically it is Western, Eastern text. So Western concept with Eastern poetics. That is the main, core of this text. And then it continued. Gaga mentioned about Pesiki, about it is, you can see, even I remember that Harsha told me, that American scholar, you know him, that, what's going on with Georgian romanticism? Why we can find so many Eastern motifs there? And because it's not normal for romanticism, yeah. So that's I remember I asked them that is our history. That comes from this 2 and 3 century Persian influence. You understand? When we were translating this poetry, and it was very much invented in Georgian literature, and that's when from like after Goethe and on the end of 19th century, the beginning of 20th century, Europe already started to get close to East. We already were there. We knew that. It was in our character. So that's why I think it was one of the main lines of symbolist poetry. Also, if I expressed what I wanted to say, so it did not start with symbolism. So it started much more earlier.
That's why they were referring to the past.
That's why they are referring to past, yeah.
In fact, Romanticism is very strongly interested in Eastern
A lot.
influences.
Georgian Romanticism.
But you are like him born with this, with both East and West.
Yeah, it was so natural.
It wasn't exotism for you, having this.
Yes, even if I'm correct, Gaga, even it was some kind of escapism within romanticism, that there was this East which was not touched, that they could escape there. So it's very interesting. One of the bottom lines of Georgian Romanticism. And it's interesting why they are doing this, but this is the fact that they are doing. And then symbolists, they are very naturally going to that. And even now, yeah. Postmodern poets and artists, they are...
Maybe for you it would be rather a problem to have proper realism. I know this.
We had proper realism.
Not Soviet. Not Soviet.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but it's just very genetically already established thing for our culture. Yeah.
Thank you, colleagues. We are very punctual, so if there are no more questions, I would suggest that we move the conversation to a more informal place. Thanks again to our guest lecturers for the wonderful presentations.